Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
This time, we're going to be looking at an interview with Ahmed Samir.
Okay.
He was recently on this Arabic language podcast, and we had some questions about
Yeah.
his career path and just his outlook on things in general.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, he seems to really focus on the process of figuring out what his purpose is as
Yeah.
opposed to just the destination.
And he even uses this phrase, the conclusion,
Right.
to describe finding his purpose. What do you think about that?
It is kind of like he's almost like rejecting the idea that there's one right answer or that there's an end point.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about constant exploration and evolution, right?
Totally. And what's cool is he seems genuinely happy with that.
Yeah.
It's not about reaching some finish line. It's about
Right.
enjoying the process.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that path a little because it's kind of all over the place.
Okay.
He starts out in aerospace engineering at Zuel City.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty specific
Yeah.
area to go into, so that's not necessarily what you would expect.
Not at all. And then he makes this jump into sustainability and mobility.
Okay.
And now he's a pretty big deal on LinkedIn. He's a prominent voice for these things.
So do we know if there were any clues early on that he might go in this direction, or was it all planned out?
Well, he describes it as this combination of his own efforts and what he calls divine guidance.
Okay.
So it's almost like he's open to these opportunities as they come up. He even said that when he was in university, he couldn't have pictured the type of work he's doing now even existing.
Wow.
It didn't exist.
That's so true, though, right? You can have these goals and
Yeah.
plans, but sometimes the best path just kind of unfolds organically. you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So that brings us to his current role.
Okay.
It's at the Bouger Trevaux Publics Group.
Oh, wow.
It's a French company.
Yeah.
And yeah, the name is a little much.
I was going to say.
He even admitted it took him a full year to be able to pronounce it.
I can only imagine.
But putting the name aside, they're a big deal in this industry called TIC.
Tick.
It stands for Testing, Inspection, and Certification.
Oh, okay.
And it's becoming more and more important for
Yeah.
all kinds of companies.
Yeah, for sure.
But the company itself is huge. He describes it as feeling like a small country.
A small country.
Yeah, because they have something like 86,000 employees
Wow.
in 150 different countries.
That really does put it into perspective, right?
Yeah.
When you say a small country, you can kind of feel that vastness.
Yeah, totally. So where does Ahmed fit into this small country?
Yeah, good question.
Well, he heads up their sustainability business unit,
Okay.
and this unit was recently formed.
So this is where it all comes together.
Yeah.
His background, his outlook, this new role.
Exactly. So his team basically helps companies reduce their environmental impact.
Okay.
They're all about lowering carbon emissions,
Makes sense.
finding ways to be more energy efficient, even trimming down operational costs through sustainable practices.
That's smart. They're facing more and more pressure to be
Yeah.
environmentally conscious, both from regulations and from just customers in general.
Totally. And he's responsible for this whole unit, but specifically in the Middle East and the Caspian Sea region.
The Caspian Sea region.
Yeah.
That's not the first place that pops into my head when I think about sustainability.
Right. That's actually where things took a bit of an unexpected turn for him, too.
Really?
Yeah. He said that initially he didn't really get the significance of that region.
I guess it's easy to fall into that trap, right? We tend to focus on certain parts of the world and forget about others.
Totally. And he had this really interesting experience in Kazakhstan
Okay.
where he talks about how they have all these vast natural resources. They even have a space launch station.
Wow.
And he said that from their perspective, it feels like they're at the center of the world.
It's it challenges our assumptions, right?
Yeah.
It reminds us that there are multiple centers
Yeah,
and that our own perspective might be a little limited.
absolutely. So on top of all this, Ahmed is also pretty open about his sort of unusual work style.
Okay.
He says he can't just focus on one thing at a time.
I think a lot of people can relate to that,
Right?
but it's not always framed as a good thing.
Exactly. And at first, he saw it as a weakness,
Huh.
but now he views it as a strength.
Interesting.
He even went so far as to call it a medical phenomenon.
There's a scientific reason for it.
Yeah, there might be some sort of explanation for his need to multitask.
It does make you wonder if there are different ways of being productive.
Right.
Right.
So while his main gig is sustainability at Booz,
Yeah.
he's got all these other projects going on the side, mostly related to sustainable mobility, like electric vehicles
good.
and the charging infrastructure for them.
So he's got his hands full.
Yeah, but it seems to work for him.
I wonder how he manages it all. Do we get any insight into like...
He doesn't go into too much detail,
Okay.
but it does raise the question, is this kind of multitasking sustainable long term?
Yeah, will it lead to burnout?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it really challenges that traditional thinking that you have to focus on just one thing at a time to be successful.
Yeah.
Maybe there's more than one way to think about productivity.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting how his work with sustainability in this like super diverse region ties back to his belief in the importance of the journey.
Right. That's a great call.
Like he's always weaving together these different threads.
Yeah.
His engineering background, his passion for sustainability, all these experiences in these unexpected places.
And it kind of all culminates in this role where he's basically helping these companies navigate a world that's constantly changing.
Yeah. And speaking of connecting different places, it brings up this fascinating historical connection that I think is worth talking about.
Okay, I'm all ears. I love those little historical tidbits.
So he points out that the Silk Road, that ancient network of trade routes connecting the East and the West?
Yeah.
It actually passed right through the Caspian Sea region.
That's right. It was like a main hub for cultural exchange and trade for centuries. Yeah. I'd never thought about it in that context before.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
He makes this parallel between the Silk Road of the past and the sustainability movement of today.
Okay. How does he connect those two things? They seem pretty different.
So he says that just like the Silk Road allowed for the exchange of goods and ideas across these huge distances, the sustainability movement is also about connecting different regions and cultures around a common goal.
I see where he's going with this.
This time it's about protecting the planet.
Right. So they both require collaboration and understanding different viewpoints and having this long-term vision.
Yeah, it's about realizing that we're not just working in isolation. What we do in one part of the world affects everyone else.
For sure.
And he doesn't just talk about environmental sustainability. He brings up social and economic sustainability, too.
Right, because it's not just about the environment.
Yeah.
It's about creating a world that's fair and just for everyone.
Exactly. It's about thinking holistically and understanding how everything's connected. It's not just about reducing carbon emissions. It's about creating a better future for everyone.
It's about recognizing that we're all part of this global community.
Yeah.
And that our actions have consequences.
And that brings us back to Ahmed's story. From aerospace engineering to sustainability.
Yeah.
From Egypt to the Caspian Sea region.
It's a pretty incredible journey.
His story shows us how powerful it can be to have different experiences, challenge your own assumptions, and look for those connections that you might not expect.
It reminds us that sometimes the best paths are the ones we don't plan for.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Ahmed's world, what's the one thing you think people will remember?
For me, it's about staying curious, being open to new things, and understanding that we're all connected.
I love that. And I think it's a great place to end it. He's kind of like a modern-day Silk Road traveler,
Yeah, I like that.
Bringing all these different experiences and skills to this field that's all about connecting the world.
And, thinking about this historical perspective, it makes you think about sustainability beyond just right now.
Yeah.
The Silk Road reminds us that all these connections have existed for centuries.
Right.
And that our choices today are going to have an impact far beyond our own lifetime.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
It does. It's humbling.
Yeah, it makes you realize we're just part of this much bigger story.
And it brings up another important point that I think comes out in Ahmed's story.
Yeah.
The importance of taking action. He didn't just wait around for someone else to create the change he wanted to see.
Right. He just went for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's easy to feel like, what can I do?
Oh, yeah, especially with these big global issues.
But his story shows us that we all have a part to play.
Yeah, no matter who you are.
It's not just about these huge companies and international agreements.
Right.
Real change happens at the individual level, too.
Through the choices we make every day.
Exactly.
It's pretty inspiring when you think about it. It proves that you don't have to have it all figured out to make a difference.
Right.
You can just start where you are with what you have.
You have that power to make change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Ahmed's world and his connection to the Silk Road, what's one question we can leave our listeners with? Something for them to think about.
How about this? How can each of us help build a world